Hey everyone, and welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are going to dive into the massive, invisible web of regulations that literally keeps global shipping afloat. If you've ever looked out at a massive container ship or a towering passenger ferry and wondered, how on earth do they safely navigate the oceans? Well, the answer lies in one foundational text. It's called the International Convention for the Safety of Life at Sea, or as it's better known, SOLAS. It is absolutely unequivocally the most important international treaty when it comes to merchant ship safety.
But to really understand why SOLAS exists in the first place, we have to look at a pretty staggering, tragic number, 1,500. That's the number of lives lost on the RMS Titanic back in 1912. That disaster was the ultimate, tragic catalyst for modern maritime safety. The sinking of the Titanic exposed some massive, fatal gaps in how we manage ships globally. Most famously, there was a stark lack of enough lifeboats for everyone on board, right? But there were also catastrophic failures in radio watches and passenger evacuation protocols. Honestly, before 1912, there were basically no international safety standards at all. Different countries just had wildly different rules. That tragedy forced the world to wake up and act. Tracing the evolution of SOLAS, we can see it shift from this reactive measure into a totally comprehensive treaty. In 1914, the first SOLAS convention was actually adopted, bringing in baseline standards for lifeboats and firefighting. Unfortunately, the outbreak of the First World War prevented it from entering into force. Fast forward to 1960, and the newly formed IMO, the Intergovernmental Maritime Consultative Organization, takes the reins, bringing the convention into the modern era. But they ran into a huge problem. Technology was advancing way too fast, and the rulebook was just too clunky to amend quickly. And that brings us to 1974, which established the modern framework that we actually still use today.
Section 1. The Living Rulebook, How SOLAS Adapts. Now, what's really interesting about this is how a massive global rulebook actually stays relevant.
So think about it. How does an international treaty keep up with rapidly changing maritime tech? We're talking complex engine rooms to satellite communications. How do you do that without getting completely bogged down in endless bureaucracy? Well, the 1974 convention figured it out with something called the Tacit Acceptance Procedure. Before 1974, you had to wait for a majority of countries to actively approve every single tiny amendment. It literally took forever. Tacit acceptance flipped the script completely. Under this new procedure, amendments enter into force automatically on a specific date unless a certain number of countries actively object to it. I really want to emphasize this pivot because this specific procedure turned a rigid, clunky rulebook into a rapid response living document that adapts to new safety threats in real time. It's a real game changer.
Section 2. Blueprint for Survival, Decoding the 14 Chapters. For those of you gearing up for your MEO Class 2 exams, we are about to rapidly decode this massive framework.
We're going to intuitively group these 14 chapters so you can see how they build a complete, interconnected survival system. Let's start with the physical ship itself. Under Chapter 2-1, we have Construction, Subdivision, and Stability. This is your structural foundation. It mandates that ships must be subdivided into watertight compartments, meaning even if the hull gets breached, the vessel stays afloat. It also covers your essential machinery and build systems. Then, contrast that with Chapter 2-2, which is Fire Protection. This is about your active, onboard defenses required to extinguish deadly engine room and cargo fires. It dictates thermal fire zones, fire detection, and fixed firefighting systems. Together, these two chapters form the ship's primary physical armor. Okay, but what happens if that armor fails? That's where our essential emergency lifelines come in. Chapter 3 regulates all your life-saving appliances, your lifeboats, rescue boats, life jackets, the whole shebang. Chapter 4 handles radio communications, specifically mandating the Global Maritime Distress and Safety System, or GMDSS. This ensures ships can transmit distress alerts via satellite. Now, how do we prove these lifelines actually work? That loops us right back to Chapter 1, General Provisions. This chapter requires mandatory surveys and safety certificates, like the Cargo Ship Safety Equipment Certificate, to prove to port authorities that you're actually following Chapters 3 and 4.
Then we have Chapter 5, covering the safety of navigation, voyage planning, radar, life-saving signals. I want to point out a truly surprising fact here. Unlike most SOLAS chapters that only apply to specific classes of massive commercial ships, Chapter 5 is the great equalizer. It applies to almost everything on the water, on all voyages. From massive cargo ships right down to your buddy's private yacht, everyone has to follow these navigational rules of the road, no exceptions.
Next up, we have to look at what these ships are actually carrying. Chapter 6 covers the carriage of cargoes. This is all about the physical challenges of the load, stowing and securing heavy items, or managing grain cargoes that can actually shift and capsize a ship. Conversely, Chapter 7 is about the carriage of dangerous goods. This isn't just about weight, it's about the hazardous chemical realities. It mandates the IMDG code, strictly regulating how dangerous chemicals, packaged goods, and liquefied gases have to be segregated and handled in an emergency.
Of course, not all ships are your standard cargo carriers, and SOLAS beautifully adapts to extreme specialized use cases. Chapter 8 gives basic requirements for nuclear ships, dealing with radiation hazards. Chapter 10 makes safety codes mandatory for high-speed craft, like those fast passenger ferries. Chapter 12 imposes strict structural rules for massive bulk carriers over 150 meters to prevent catastrophic structural failure in heavy seas. And Chapter 14? That makes the Polar Code mandatory, dictating extreme machinery requirements and crew training for the freezing, totally hazardous environments of the Arctic and Antarctic.
Section 3. Safety in Action. The Human Element.
You know, you can have the best watertight compartments and lifeboats in the world, but they are completely useless without proper human management. This is where these specific chapters enforce daily accountability. Chapter IX mandates the ISM code, requiring the ship owner to establish a strict safety management system. Chapter XXI clarifies requirements for enhanced surveys and ship identification. Crucially, Chapter XXI2 brings in the ISPS code for maritime security, outlining how to protect against security threats like piracy and terrorism. Finally, Chapter 13 enforces the IMO member state audit scheme. This is essentially an audit to ensure that the flag states, the actual governments themselves, are doing their jobs and enforcing SOLAS.
Let's put this together and imagine a practical shipboard emergency drill. Say an engine room fire. Step 1, the fire alarm triggers and fixed firefighting systems stand ready. That's Chapter 2.2 in action. Step 2, the muster list is activated and the crew reports to lifeboats. That's Chapter 3. Step 3, a distress alert is prepped on the GMTSS console. That is Chapter 4. And Step 4, the entire response is guided by the ship's safety management system, which is dictated by Chapter 9. It's an incredibly synchronized, multi-chapter survival sequence playing out in real time.
Section 4. The Ultimate Exam. MEO Class 2.
So for those studying for the MEO Class 2 examination, you know this is the ultimate gatekeeping ritual for aspiring marine engineers. You're tested on everything from enclosed space rescue to the intricacies of that tacit acceptance procedure we talked about. But here's the crucial point. Marine engineers aren't just memorizing rules. They are memorizing the difference between life and death at sea. Mastering these 14 chapters isn't just about passing a test. It's about understanding that these regulations are written in the hard lessons of history. It is about carrying the heavy burden of command and preventing another Titanic.
It's an immense responsibility. So I want to leave you with this final thought. Next time you look out at the ocean and watch those massive ships disappear over the horizon, ask yourself, who is actually out there enforcing the rules? It's the dedicated marine engineers, the surveyors, and the crews standing watch armed with the 14 chapters of SOLAS, ensuring the safety of life at sea. Keep learning, keep asking questions, and thank you so much for joining me for this explainer.